Hi and welcome to episode number 632 with whatsforchow.com and the fourth episode in our Still Spirits Air Still series. In today's episode we get onto something really exciting where we're making a whiskey, an all-grain whiskey using liquid malt extract. Some may say that this is cheating, but this cuts out cooking the grains and all the mess associated with it, and ends up with pretty much exactly the same product. To start, we need 2 packs of liquid malt extracts, or LME. I'm going to use the Mangrove Jacks. This has been sent to me by Brewcraft. Mangrove Jacks, we've got a light malt extract and an amber, which is the dark one, and I'm going to mix the two. We will end up with a whiskey, but I'm hoping that having a mixture will give us a really interesting whiskey. Then on top of that we need Still Spirits Whiskey Distiller's Yeast. This pack size will be enough for 20 litres, so we're going to split the pack in two for our 10 litre batch. Interestingly, this already contains the amylase enzymes, so we don't need to add those in addition. Now, amylase converts sugars, long string sugars, into short string sugars, which makes them fermentable by the yeast. And these liquid malt extracts, or any grain product, contains maltose, which is a long string sugar. Then we have a couple of secret ingredients which will kickstart the fermentation and get a really strong and complete fermentation. This one here is called Yeast Activator. This is added to the yeast when the yeast is rehydrated. What this does is it increases and enhances the wall thickness of the yeast cells and stops any shock from the higher sugar content in the wash. We're going to add some yeast nutrient as well. The nutrient just gives the yeast all the nutrition it needs to thrive. And then Di-ammonium phosphate. In high sugar wash conditions, there is always a shortage of nitrogen. Adding diammonium phosphate, even in tiny quantities, we're only going to use a 1/4 teaspoon. Diammonium phosphate will produce nitrogen and give the yeast a very nice place to live. In addition to that, we are going to add sugar to the mix. We're going to use 1.2 kilograms of sugar. Each one of these LME packs is 1.5 kilograms. So that gives us 3 kilograms of LME and 1.2 kilograms of sugar. This is due to the fact that the liquid malt extract is only going to yield about 4% alcohol for both packs. So we need to bolster that by adding the regular sugar. And this is going to bring our end alcohol by volume level up to between 13 and 15%. Before we really get going, what we're going to do is pop the bags of LME into a hot water bath, not boiling, just hot. This stuff is really thick and gooey, and it's difficult to remove from these sacks. Some of them come in tins and bottles, same problem. What you need to do is heat them up to thin them out so that you can remove all of the good stuff from the packet. Okay, these are our ingredients measured out. We have 36 grams of the Still Spirits Distiller's Yeast for whiskey, 10 grams of the Yeast Activator, 10 grams yeast nutrient, and then just a 1/4 teaspoon of diammonium phosphate, and 1.2 kilograms sugar. The LME is still lying in the hot water bath. It needs to be there for about 15 minutes until it's softened significantly. While the LME is softening, we're going to add the sugar to the fermenter, along with enough hot water to dissolve the sugar. About 2 liters should do it. Now simply stir the water until the sugar has dissolved. Now this is hot water, it's around about 70 degrees. You don't want boiling water, you can scratch and damage the fermenting bucket if the water is too hot. Just give it a good stir until that's all dissolved. Now by this stage the LME should be soft enough to add to the mix. Now the reason why we don't add too much hot water, just enough to dissolve the sugar, is that we need to add cold water to hit our target temperature. When we pitch the yeast, we want around about 30 Celsius. So now we're going to add the LME, the warm water now. It's quite warm still, probably about 45 or 50 degrees. Will help the LME to dissolve into the water properly as well. And now for the liquid malt extract. You'll see just how thick it is, even although it has been warmed up. You really want to press the bags. Now as it all runs out, you can start folding the bag from the bottom and adding pressure to push it out. Will want to stay in the bag, and you really want to get all the good stuff out. Okay, there's the first bag. It's going to wipe that off with the spoon, the little leading edge. Now we're going to give it a stir until that's dissolved in before adding the second bag. Otherwise what is going to happen is some of the second bag is going to end up in the tube outlet for the tap, and we really don't want that sitting there all on its own. As you can see, it does dissolve readily into the water. And now number 2. Final little bit. Just wipe that off with the spoon and give it a good stir. Now to hydrate the yeast, we need to take the Still Spirits whiskey yeast. We're going to add it to about 300 ml of water at 35 degrees. Along with the yeast activator. Give that a good stir, and we'll leave that for about 15 minutes or so to start bubbling up and getting frothy. Okay, the yeast is nice and frothy. We're going to top the fermenter up to 10 liters using cool water. The aim is to try and reach around about 30 degrees Celsius. We're at 30 now, but we still need to add about 2.5 liters. So what I'm going to do is top it up to 9 liters and check the temperature again. Check the temperature again. And we're sitting at 28.8, so I'm going to add a little bit of hot water just to bring the temperature back up. And there we're at 10 liters. And we've overshot the temperature, so I'm going to let this stand for a while before we pitch the yeast. Let's just check it again after stirring. Nope, that's fine. 30.2. So we're going to pitch the yeast now. Along with the yeast, we want to add the yeast nutrient, which is this one, and the di-ammonium phosphate, which is this one. Stir those in well before adding the yeast. And then finally the yeast. Just give it a stir. And in that goes. So we have ended up slightly over 10 litres, about 10.5 litres. That's not a worry. We're going to give that a nice stir. Now we're going to put the lid on, making sure to have a clean carbon filter in the lid, and set this to 25 Celsius, or put it in a nice shady place where you can maintain a temperature around about 25 to 28 Celsius. This should ferment out in 5 to 7 days, so we'll see you back then when we will clear the wash and then distill. Thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe, like and share, and we'll see you again in a few days.